The smell hit me first. It was a mixture of stale tobacco, rain, and a specific, overly sweet musk cologne that instantly transported me back 30 years. I sat behind my mahogany desk, my fingers tracing the cold, smooth edge of the leather blotter, a habit I had developed to keep my hands from shaking during high-stakes negotiations. But today my hands were steady, stone cold. The man standing on the other side of my office door didn't know who I was. To him, I was just Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Venture Capital, the last hope for his failing construction business. But to me, he was the architect of my life's greatest nightmare. My assistant Sarah buzzed in. "Sir? Mister? Marcus Thorne is here for his 2 o'clock appointment." I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive espresso on my desk, grounding myself in the present. "Send him in," I said, my voice sounding far calmer than the storm brewing in my gut. The heavy oak door creaked open. Marcus walked in. He was heavier now, his golden hair thinning, his face lined with the stress of bad debts and failed marriages. But the arrogance was exactly the same. He didn't look at me with respect. He looked at me like a predator sizing up a meal. He adjusted his tie, a cheap imitation of silk, and extended a sweaty hand. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice booming with that fake confidence I loathed. "A pleasure. I've heard you're the man who makes miracles happen." I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just looked at him, deeply, intently, waiting for a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He didn't see the boy he had destroyed. He only saw a bank account. "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," I said softly, gesturing to the chair that was positioned slightly lower than mine, a deliberate psychological tactic. As he sat, crossing his legs and trying to look comfortable in a room that clearly intimidated him, I opened the file in front of me. It contained his desperate plea for a $2 million loan. But my mind wasn't on the numbers. My mind was drifting back to a time when I didn't have mahogany desks or Italian suits, back to the night that defined us both. He had no idea that he had just walked into a trap 30 years in the making. And as I looked at his confident smirk, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just going to deny him the money. I was going to make him understand the cost of every single tear my mother shed. But first, I had to remember. I had to let the memory wash over me one last time. The memory started with the sound of steam hissing from an old iron. It was 1994. Our apartment was small, smelling perpetually of boiled cabbage and damp wool. Outside, the relentless November rain battered the single-pane window, but inside, there was a warmth that I have never been able to replicate in my penthouse. My mother, God rest her soul, was hunched over the kitchen table. Her hands were red, the skin cracked from years of scrubbing other people's floors. She was sewing a patch onto the elbow of a black tuxedo jacket she had found at a thrift store. It was slightly too big for me, the fabric a bit rough against the skin, but to us, it was a suit of armor. "Stand still, baby," she murmured, biting off a piece of thread. I looked at myself in the cracked hallway mirror. I was skinny, awkward, my hair plastered down with water because we couldn't afford gel. "Do I look okay, Ma?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of excitement and terror. This was prom night. The night everyone said was the most important night of a teenager's life. I had saved for 3 months just to buy the ticket. I wanted, just for one night, to be part of the normal crowd. I wanted to talk to Sarah Jenkins. I wanted to exist. My mother turned me around, her tired eyes shining with tears of pride. She smoothed the lapels of that secondhand jacket as if it were made of royal velvet. "You don't just look okay," she whispered, cupping my face with her rough, warm hands. "You look like a gentleman. You have a good heart, son. That shines brighter than any new suit." I believed her. That was my mistake. I actually believed that a good heart and a clean shirt were enough to protect me from the wolves. I grabbed the umbrella, one spoke was broken, and kissed her cheek. "I won't be late," I promised. As I walked out into the rainy night, clutching my plastic corsage box, I felt a surge of hope. I felt like maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. I didn't know that I was walking toward a slaughter. The high school gym smelled of cheap fruit punch and teenage desperation. The music was loud, pounding against my chest, but I felt invisible. I stayed near the bleachers, clutching a cup of red punch, trying to blend into the shadows. I saw Marcus across the room. He was the king of the school quarterback, wealthy, loud. He was wearing a custom-tailored white tuxedo that probably cost more than my mother made in 6 months. He was surrounded by his court, the golden circle, laughing, pointing, owning the space. I tried to make myself smaller, but then he saw me. His eyes locked onto my patched jacket. A cruel grin spread across his face, sharp and predatory. He nudged his friends, whispered something, and they all turned to look at me. My stomach dropped. I wanted to run, but my feet were frozen. They approached me like a pack of wolves circling a wounded deer. Well, Marcus boomed, his voice cutting through the music. Look who crawled out of the gutter. The music seemed to stop for everyone around us. The circle tightened. Nice jacket, he sneered, reaching out and flicking the patch my mother had sewn with so much love. Did your mommy make that from her cleaning rags? The crowd giggled. My face burned hot, shame rising like bile in my throat. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, gripping my cup. You don't belong here, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. This is for people who matter. And then, with a casual, almost bored motion, he bumped my arm, hard. The red fruit punch flew out of my cup. It splashed all over his pristine white tuxedo, but no, that's not what happened. He bumped me, but he tipped his cup. A wave of sticky, red liquid drenched my shirt, my cheap tie, and the jacket my mother had worked on for hours. It soaked through to my skin, cold and humiliating. The gym went silent for a heartbeat, and then eruption, laughter, cruel, hysterical laughter. Marcus looked at me, feigning shock. Oops, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Trash needs to be washed, right? He didn't just ruin my suit. He killed my dignity. I stood there, red stain spreading like a wound over my heart, while the girl I liked covered her mouth to hide a giggle. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I turned around and walked out into the rain, the sound of their laughter chasing me like a demon. That was the moment I realized mercy is a luxury I could no longer afford. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, and the cheap leather of my shoes soaked through with mud. I didn't go back to school on Monday. In fact, I never set foot in that town again after graduation. I became a ghost. For the next 4 years, while Marcus was probably partying at some Ivy League fraternity on his daddy's dime, I was invisible. I attended a state university on a full scholarship, but I didn't go to football games, I didn't go to mixers, I didn't date. My world shrank to the size of a library cubicle. The smell of old books and floor wax became my perfume. I worked 2 jobs stocking shelves at a grocery store at night and tutoring rich kids in calculus during the day. I remember the exhaustion, a heavy gray blanket that never really lifted. But every time my eyes started to close over a textbook at 3 a.m., I would hear it. That sound, the collective, mocking laughter of the golden circle. It was the fuel that kept my engine running when my body wanted to quit. I stopped looking people in the eye. I learned that if you look down, if you look busy, nobody hurts you. Nobody spills punch on you. I graduated at the top of my class, summa cum laude. I remember walking across the stage to get my diploma, hearing the polite applause. It meant nothing. I didn't want applause. I wanted power. I wanted to build a fortress so high and so strong that no one could ever look down on me again. I got my first job on Wall Street, not because I was charming, but because I was a machine. I crunched numbers faster than the computers. I found errors that seasoned partners missed. But even as I deposited my first big bonus check, even as I bought my first tailored suit, I looked in the mirror and I didn't see a successful banker. I still saw the boy with the stained jacket. That was the moment I realized, you can change your clothes, but you can never change your ghosts. Years turned into decades. The boy who was afraid of his own shadow died, and in his place, a man made of steel emerged. They started calling me the architect in the financial district. Not because I built buildings, but because I structured deals that reshaped industries. I was ruthless, yes, but I was always fair. That was my code. I never cheated, I never lied. If you did the work, I backed you. If you were a leech, I cut you off. I had everything I thought I wanted. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a collection of vintage watches, silence. Beautiful, controlled silence. I had convinced myself that I had moved on. I told myself that Marcus Thorne was just a bad memory, a relic of a past life. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, rainy and gray, just like that night. My assistant placed a stack of high-risk loan applications on my desk. These were the desperate cases, the ones other banks had already rejected. I usually skimmed them just to be thorough before rejecting them myself. I flipped the first page, rejected. I flipped the second, rejected. Then, I turned the third page. The name leaped off the paper like a physical blow. Thorne Construction, applicant Marcus Thorne. My heart stopped. Literally missed a beat. I read it again and again. The address was in my old hometown. The financials were a disaster. He was drowning in debt. He needed a lifeline. He needed ME. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly in the quiet office. A cold, strange smile touched my lips for the first time in years. Fate hadn't just knocked on my door, it had kicked it open. That was the moment I realized the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and I was about to deliver the punchline. Back in the present, the air in my office felt thick. Marcus was still talking, unaware that he was digging his own grave with every sentence. "You see, Mr. Sterling," he said, leaning forward and putting his sweaty elbows on my pristine desk. "The economy has been tough on visionaries like me. The banks, the local banks, they don't understand big pictures. They count pennies." He let out a dismissive scoff. "Small minds." I watched him. I studied him like a biologist studying a specimen under a microscope. He was wearing a gold watch that looked heavy, flashy, but I could tell from the way the light hit the crystal that it was a replica. He was trying so hard to project success, but he smelled of failure. "Vision is expensive, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice smooth and neutral. "But numbers rarely lie. Your application says you've defaulted on 3 subcontractors in the last year." Marcus waved his hand dismissively, a gesture of pure arrogance. "Contractors," he sneered. "They're lazy, they try to cheat you. I had to teach them a lesson. You know how it is, right? Men like us, we have to keep the help in line. Men like US." The audacity took my breath away. He actually thought we were equals. He thought he was sitting across from a peer. He had no idea he was speaking to the boy he once called trash. I picked up a silver pen, twisting it slowly between my fingers. "Tell me about your project, Marcus," I said, using his first name deliberately. I saw his eye twitch. He didn't like the familiarity from a stranger, but he needed the money too badly to object. "It's a luxury condo complex," he began, puffing out his chest. "High-end, exclusive, no riffraff allowed." The irony was so sharp, it almost cut me. "No riffraff," I repeated slowly. "Selected clientele only?" "Exactly," he beamed, thinking he had hooked me. "We keep the standards high, keep the undesirable elements out." That was the moment I realized he hadn't changed. Not one bit. And that made what I was about to do so much easier. I flipped the page of the financial report, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "These numbers, Marcus," I started, keeping my eyes on the paper. "They don't add up. You're projecting a 40% return in the first year based on, what, air?" Marcus shifted in his seat, the leather chair squeaking in protest. "Market trends," he said quickly. "Too quickly. And my reputation. People buy because it's a Thorne building." I looked up. "Your reputation," I repeated flatly. I pulled out a separate sheet from the file, a credit report that he probably didn't know I had access to. "Is that why you have 3 pending lawsuits from former investors?" Is that why you emptied your daughter's college fund to pay for the zoning permits? His face went pale. The arrogance flickered, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. That's private family business, he stammered. It has nothing to do with the loan. Everything is connected, Marcus, I said, leaning forward, interlacing my fingers. Character is collateral. And from what I see here, your character is overdrawn. He stood up, indignant, trying to regain the upper hand. I didn't come here to be insulted by some pencil pusher. If you don't see the vision, I'll take my business elsewhere. There are plenty of banks who would kill for this opportunity. I didn't blink. I knew there were no other banks. I knew I was the end of the line. Sit down, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of an anvil. He hesitated, then slowly sank back into the chair. I closed the folder. You know, Marcus, looking at this mess, it reminds me of something I heard a long time ago. Something about how trash needs to be taken out. I watched his eyes. He frowned, a confused look crossing his face. The phrase was familiar to him, but he couldn't quite place it. That was the moment I realized he had said so many cruel things to so many people over the years, he couldn't even remember his own greatest hits. The air conditioner was humming, but beads of sweat were starting to form on Marcus's forehead. He wiped them away with the back of his hand, leaving a faint smear on his cheek. I decided it was time to stop talking about money and start talking about ghosts. You attended Lincoln High, didn't you? I asked casually, picking up my coffee cup. Marcus looked surprised by the pivot. Yeah, class of '94. Why? I see here you borrowed money from a Gary Miller last year, I said, glancing at the notes. Gary Miller. Wasn't he the guy who used to carry your gym bag? The one you guys used to call the mule? Marcus laughed, a nervous, forced sound. Gary? Yeah, good old Gary. He wanted to invest. He believes in me. He sued you, Marcus. I corrected him coldly. He lost his house because of your investment. You crushed him. Marcus shrugged, regaining a bit of his defensive sneer. Business is war. Casualties happen. Gary was always soft. He wasn't cut out for the big leagues. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost made me dizzy, but I channeled it into my voice, making it even colder. I stood up slowly and walked around the desk. I was standing right next to him now. I could smell the fear coming off him. It smelled like sour milk. I leaned against the edge of the desk, looking down at him. I reached out and touched the sleeve of my own suit jacket. It was Italian wool, soft as butter. Nice fabric, isn't it? I asked. Marcus looked confused, his eyes darting from my face to my jacket. Yeah, very nice. My mother didn't make this one, I said softly, but she made the last one you saw. He froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The room went deathly silent. That was the moment I realized the prey finally knew the hunter was in the room. Marcus stared at me. At first, it was just confusion. He squinted, his eyes searching my face, trying to peel back the years, the expensive haircut, the tailored suit, and then it happened. It started in his eyes, a widening of the pupils. Then his jaw went slack. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. He looked at the scar on my chin, a small one from a childhood bike accident, and the recognition hit him like a physical slap. No, he whispered. It was a breathless, terrified sound. No, it's not possible. Hello, Marcus, I said, my voice dropping to the same register I used to have when I was 17. Did you enjoy the punch? He scrambled backward in his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. He looked like he had seen a ghost, in a way he had. You're the ghost. He couldn't even say the word. He couldn't say poor kid or loser in this office, surrounded by my power. I'm the trash. I finished for him. The one you said needed to be washed out. Marcus started to shake. His hands were trembling so violently he had to grip the armrests. Mr. Sterling, please, we were kids. It was just a joke. Just a high school prank. A joke, I repeated, tasting the word. You broke a spoke on my umbrella. You ruined the only jacket my mother could afford. You made me walk home in the rain while you laughed. Was that the punchline, Marcus? He tried to smile, a grotesque, pleading grimace. Look, I can apologize. I am sorry, truly. But this loan, my family, please, don't mix business with the past. I looked at him, pathetic and small, in my guest chair. I walked back to my desk and sat down, reclaiming my throne. Oh, Marcus, I said calmly. This isn't about the past. This is strictly business. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was only sorry that the person he stepped on had finally learned how to stand up. I opened the file again, my movements deliberate and slow. You said not to mix business with the past, I began, my voice steady. So let's look at the business, Marcus. Let's look at the facts. I pointed to the profit and loss statement. You treat your company's accounts like a personal piggy bank. You bleed your partners dry to fund a lifestyle you can't afford. That shows a lack of discipline. I pointed to the lawsuit section. You burn bridges with people who trust you. That shows a lack of integrity. I looked up, locking eyes with him. In my world, Marcus, we don't bet on the horse. We bet on the jockey. And looking at you, I see a man who thinks the world owes him a living just because he was popular at 17. Marcus wiped his face, his breathing heavy and ragged. I can change, he pleaded. I can get a CFO. I can step back. You can't. I cut him off. Because you are arrogant. You think you are above the rules. You thought you could walk into my office, charm the banker, and walk out with millions. You didn't do your homework. You didn't check who I was. Because to you, people like me don't have faces. We are just props in your movie. I closed the heavy leather binder with a sharp snap that made him flinch. I am denying this loan, Marcus, not because I hate you, but because you are a bad investment. You are a liability, and my shareholders, they don't like liabilities. That was the moment I realized. The greatest insult wasn't shouting at him, it was telling him the truth he had spent his whole life avoiding. Marcus stared at the closed folder. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then, the begging began. It was pathetic, really. The king of Lincoln High, the man who used to strut through the hallways like a god, was now hunching forward, his hands clasped together like a sinner in church. Please, he croaked. Sterling, listen. If I don't get this money, I lose everything. My house, my car, my wife will leave me. I'll be destitute. I watched him, searching for a shred of empathy in my own heart. I found none. I remembered the rain soaking my socks. I remembered my mother's tears when she saw the ruined jacket. You won't be destitute, Marcus, I said coldly. You'll just be ordinary, like the rest of us. I reached for the rubber stamp on my desk. It was an old-fashioned, heavy wooden stamp with red ink. I inked it slowly. You know, that night at the prom, I said, holding the stamp suspended in the air. I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that the world is hard. You taught me that. Now, I'm returning the favor. I brought the stamp down. Thud. The red letters denied glared up from the paper. Lesson over, I whispered. Marcus looked at the stamp, then at me. His eyes were wet. He stood up shakily, looking like an old man. He didn't scream, he didn't threaten. He just turned around, his shoulders slumped in total defeat, and walked toward the heavy oak door. He looked small, he looked finished. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to push him off a cliff. I just had to let gravity do its work. I didn't call security. I didn't need to. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. The rain had started again, streaks of water running down the glass, blurring the lights of Manhattan below. Down on the street, I saw a tiny figure exit the building. He stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the sky, no umbrella, just letting the rain soak into his expensive, fake suit. For a second, I felt a heavy weight lift off my chest, a weight I had been carrying for 30 years. The anger, the bitterness, the need to prove myself, it all evaporated. I wasn't the boy in the patched jacket anymore, and he wasn't the king. We were just two men, separated by the choices we had made. I turned back to my desk. The office was quiet. The smell of his cheap musk cologne was fading, replaced by the clean scent of the rain and old leather. I sat down, picked up my pen, and buzzed my assistant. "Sarah?" I said, my voice calm and light. "Mr. Thorne has left. You can send in the next file." "Yes, sir," she replied. "Are you okay?" I paused, looking at the empty chair where my ghost had just sat. I smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. "I'm better than okay, Sarah," I replied. "I'm finally free." I went back to work. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, just as I had washed away the stain of the past. That was the moment I realized true success isn't about making them pay. It's about reaching a place where they can no longer afford you.